Hi there, Rom. I've got for your comment there, I've got the blog on the agenda, but before that, we've got Phil on the agenda too. Phil, is 6 days or so enough to get back from the jet lag and get time zones reoriented for you?
Yeah, pretty much. I don't have many superpowers, but somehow traveling across time zones seems, I shouldn't say it because next time it'll be horrible, but seems to not be too painful for me.
I wonder if kids help at all with that, waking up at random hours of the day.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so.
Well, around 5 after, we've still got a few people trickling in, but I guess we can go ahead and kick this thing off. You want to take it away, Phil?
Sure. Um, yeah, it's mostly that I'm trying to keep beating the drum of the Container Plumbing Days event in Seattle that is adjacent to the open source summit happening that week. Um, Two things. One is that um, the folks running the event just want to make sure that uh, folks know about it. It is a separate ticket. We tried to set the price low so it's reachable for most folks. I think the LF always has some ability to support maintainers or uh, various situations, unemployed. So if that's an issue, I'm sure we can get the LF involved. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how many of the folks here, but I know folks might watch the recording. So I will add a link to the notes because I just realized I didn't uh, add a link to the event page. Second issue that's a little more OCI specific is that because the event was formulated with the idea that this is about the plumbing of containers and images and therefore intersects with the specs. We have like I mentioned before, two slots at the end of the day, two 45-minute sessions that are not talks. They're open discussion blocks where the room setup should be multiple tables. And so my idea was that those tables have uh, either assigned topics or if we really, can't narrow it down by, well, I guess 2 weeks, in the next couple of weeks, we could obviously just in the moment have some discussion topics by those floated by those who are there. But um, it doesn't have to be during this call, but even if you watch the recording later, um, I'd just love to collect up ideas for topics. One obvious potential topic is folks who want to consume 1.1. If we have anyone there who kind of was part of the process, I think we'll have some AWS folks because it's in Seattle. Hoping to get them there, but folks that want to understand artifacts and references, there could be a kind of informal discussion around applying 1.1. But if you have other topics, if you have ideas for things that you think people who aren't all involved, like at the level of this meeting, but obviously the OCI specs have a lot of consumers as well. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. If you want to shoot me a message, or put them in OCI Slack somewhere where I can see them. I'm just hoping to collect some of those up before that day.
I'm curious if anybody here is going to be able to make it to that event other than yourself, Phil.
Come on, Brian, it's down the street. Or actually, I don't know where
going.
you're new. Oh, cool. Yeah.
So you at least get somebody there. I figured Seattle has a little bit of
I
a
heard
focus area.
Sebastian might be coming, maybe.
Oh, cool. That'd be awesome.
I seem to recall him asking me about it. So
Yeah, and we do have so folks that most people would know here were part of the program committee, so all that's done and the schedule's put together. I'll post that in the chat. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting mix of different topics, but yeah, love to see as many folks as we can get there. I know, if you're not aware, Red Hat used to run this event for a couple of years as a virtual 2-day event. So this is essentially a follow-on with the LF taking ownership. We did hear recently, so is that on the website? They apparently do have a setup for streaming. So even if you can't come to Seattle, now I don't remember the registration offering like a virtual registration. So yeah, sorry I didn't come here with exact information on that, but I just know from an email thread that I was surprised to hear that they're recording and a bit able to live stream, which would include, I think, the OCI discussion. So Brandon, I don't know if that would open it up for your participation, but
I know we had at least one person that was interested in presenting but couldn't be there in person, so I wonder if that had any influence on that.
yeah. Yeah, I'll make sure before next week's meeting to have concrete information on that. But all right, thanks.
Very cool. Thank you, Phil. So I threw a bunch of stuff on the agenda, but if anybody else wants to chat about other things, feel free to preempt me and we can go other directions. But first was that there is the 1.1 blog post for folks to review and give feedback on, and hopefully get that merged and published in a bit. Get my screen shared here 1 second. So yeah, I think I've been pulling in feedback from folks as they've been adding it. And if anybody else has more ideas, things you'd like to see changed, PR sitting open, ready for review. And yeah, I just hope we can get this pushed out in the not too distant future here. Rom, I think I saw you in the chat earlier. Is there stuff you want to talk about? I know with this one I hadn't quite closed because I thought it was a little bit possibly unresolved, but not necessarily.
Yeah, so this particular topic I think is going to come up, and I think we should be as clear as possible. So registries which support this API and which don't, and because vast majority of them won't as of now, but at the same time they may want to move to supporting this. So what do they need to do? So I think this is what is the status quo and where they need to be and how the behavior changes. So I think we need to be very clear on this.
Yeah, I think when I was writing this specific section, I'll switch over to the other view. That way it'll be easier for folks to read. When I was putting it together, it was focused around people writing clients that needed to do the fallback scenario. So where we have that support for existing registries. So this was very much written that if you're writing a client and you happen to talk to an existing registry that has not upgraded and hadn't made the changes, how do you need to act? And so the link to the fallback tag itself, how we do that, and then pointing out that when you push a manifest that it needs to respond with this OCI subject header, and it needs to be set to the value of the subject, assuming that subject field was there. If it wasn't there, you're not using refers. And then on the get, it was the differentiation between a 200 response and pretty much anything else, because you never know what registries are going to throw at us. So I think the concern here is just on the phrasing of this last sentence. Where is it cut off? Yeah, similarly. So in this last sentence, there's better ways to phrase that. Feel free to chime in with ideas on that. But yeah, the real goal here is just to make sure that it's clear that registries themselves shouldn't be sending out 404 content if they don't see the refer that you're querying for. If you query for a digest that doesn't recognize, or a digest just doesn't have any refers, that they still need to do the 200. But I think we've got that pretty clear in the spec. But from the flip side, for clients, when they're writing it, this is how they can tell the difference on their side. Yeah, to Sajay's point, a lot of this, I have links going back to the spec on just about everything here. So, for example, this one, it links into the tag schema section, which says, here it is, here's the scenario, all the details. So hopefully if there are questions, they know to go click through those, but you never know. Yeah, this one's been out for a little bit, and this has already been delayed since our release. So sooner the better, as folks have the chance to look through this and give some feedback. That would be good. Any questions there? A lot of the rest of this, well, this one, this is actually a 6-door cosign one, and this is in the meeting notes, but I'll also drop in our chat in case people don't have the notes up. Cosign group was adding their own definition for what they wanted to make things look like. And one of the changes they had done, or one of the things they'd done, was they were defining artifact type and also the media type of their layer later on that had one of these as parameter on the media type. And we do point to section 4.2 of the spec that says, here's how you define the media type, make sure to use the syntax. But we don't necessarily say that, hey, you can only use this, you can't use what's later on in the 4.3. So I don't know if there might be some better phrasing that we can say that we shouldn't have parameters, or conversely, if I'm completely wrong, speak up and we can make it clear that parameters are allowed in the media type, and then they don't have to worry about changing their stuff. They can just tell the registries to be a little more permissive. Has anybody given that thought for both artifact type and later on down here in the layers, the media type doing the same thing where they're adding a parameter onto the media type? Thoughts either way on that? Has anybody written validation for that? And I guess for that, Sajay, Toddy, and maybe Ram, if any of you have written code on either the client or the server doing validation of that content, did you restrict that?
Don't think so. As long as it is OCI, we just take it here, at least on the outside.
think it was AWS that might have been doing some validating on it. And they are rejecting it, and they're making a push on the SigSource side to say AWS need to be more permissive on it. And I chimed in saying that quite possible that they're just not seeing people restrict this just because there haven't been a lot of implementations written on this yet. And if they're doing a 1.0, they would just let anything through.
As at least as if this gets adopted, more artifacts move to this, then you have to loosen this up a bit, because there is no way we can figure out what kinds of things end up here.
The flip side, I think, is there better phrasing that we can say inside of the spec? Because the spec itself points over and says it needs to be a media type according to the 4.2 naming restrictions. And I just wonder if there is something we should put in here that just says, look, it is these following, and maybe a regex, maybe pointing to the specific field. I'm looking for the major/minor, or whatever their term is for this stuff, for the media type. I'm looking for that / syntax. I'm not seeing it in here just yet. I mean, all the examples are just text, and then, yeah, the top level, and then the individual, the subtypes. So whatever text we need to add to this, that's kind of going through my head of making this more clear in the spec, because that was one of the feedback comments. When they went reading through this, they continued scrolling down. They saw 4.3, and 4.3 said, hey, you can use the media type with all these other things. And they said, oh, great. We'll use all the features. Another quiet bunch today. Sajay from as another image spec maintainer, or maybe. What else do we have on here that's image spec today? Wrong spec. On the right spec.
This is for the, we kind of bounce around the pagination one, right now? Or is it the blog that you're talking about? Totally lost track, sorry.
The one that I'm talking about right now is the artifact type and the media type having allowing parameters or explicitly denying it. And we point to 4.2 in the image spec, but we don't necessarily say much in there beyond that. I guess I can pick on Tianon as well on this one. Let me find the spot in the spec where we've got that, and then we can compare the wording on this. So in here, we point to and say that, you know, this value, if defined, it must comply with the RFC, including the 4.2 naming requirements, may be registered with IANA. But I'm wondering if we need more clarification or regex or something in here that just says it's only certain values without parameters, or if I'm completely off base and the parameters are allowed.
John
there
is the
any-
media type expert, right?
What's that?
John is a media type expert. I think he did talk about referring to RFCs before. But is the RFC ambiguous?
I don't want to say the RFC is ambiguous, but I think we are ambiguous on what part of the RFC we're looking to follow. Because even though we point to 4.2, we also point to the entire RFC, and the entire RFC says parameters are part of the definition. It's just 4.3 instead of 4.2. And on any thoughts from your side? All right, this one might need a little more thought. I'll leave it up there, but I wanted to at least get some more eyes on that one just because we've got me giving comments to other people without checking with the group here first. And so I wanted to see if I'm completely off base or not. We can look at other confrontational stuff today if we've got enough people for that. I've also got some general stuff for both distribution and image spec if folks want to do a little bit of reviews on things. Got a couple of image spec maintainers, so we might be able to get a couple of those knocked out. Do we have another distribution spec maintainer here? I'm bad. I keep forgetting who my other fellow maintainers are. We also need to get some more maintainers, I think. But I don't think I see any others in here right now. So should I stick to image spec for a little bit today?
Yeah, maybe. Might be easier.
So here is going to be an easy one. I say that only because it's Tianan's PR. Is this one good to merge? And what Tianan was working on was just being updating the text for the platform variants. And the platform variants themselves add a little table there being clear because before all we had was a couple variants for ARM and ARM64. And now we've got variants for ARM, ARM64, PowerPC, RISC, x86. I think the x86 was the one that kind of drove a lot of this. And then we got a few others up there as well. I suspect as people start doing this, it's going to be a little bit of chaos out there while implementations catch up and realize that there are more than one variant for x86.
So I remember that when we had added our first variants, which was ARM, of course, the ARM open source team was very involved in kind of helping people think through like the resolution of, specific information, proc CPU info, and translating that to variants. Like, I mean, I know this is just the spec, and it's not the role of the spec to guide sort of that detail and implementation, but I'm curious, like from these communities, is there anywhere the implementations exist already of like the x86 64, or maybe that's the easy one, but
Everything here has been keying off of the Go variables. And so Go has a variable for Go AMD 64 that then switches a handful of things on their side. And I think that even goes up to like a Wikipedia page somewhere that says, hey, here's V1 implements a handful. I went through this specifically for x86, and so I can line up, I think Tianan pointed over to a better implementation than mine. That was Apologies, I go find my own implementation so I can point to it. But there are
Yeah.
also some other developers doing that as well. You're asking more about the detection, Phil, or just in general? the
Yeah,
definition?
yeah, I guess detection, like thinking it'd be really annoying for image builders if like Creo like somehow parse things slightly differently than Containerd or Docker or I don't know if there's a way to have a
Yeah,
so what
I think that's the link I'm looking for.
oh this is Red Cloud. Oh, so you have an
I did a little bit on mine. I was also keying off of a bunch of other implementations, but here is Golang itself. It says for AMD 64, they've got a bunch of these V1, 2, 3, and 4, and the exact instructions that are keyed off of for each one of them.
I see, yeah.
So they were very specific on that. How you go through and get that, it's a little more fun.
Yeah, because I think a lot of those sort of API like SSE, AVX, that's all in like the CPU flag data. So you'd be parsing that and making a decision at runtime. I get on the runtime side.
Yeah.
Uh,
Tony's did one a while back. That was the other one I was looking for here. And so I took some of his, I took a handful of other people working on it, but a lot of these go out and look at what's his implementation over here, I think. I think each of these also had like this function is actually over here in the assembly code. And then
got it. Okay.
calling that assembly code then goes through and runs a bunch of this detection. So handful of us went through some of this effort here. I'll link over to Tony's. And I'm probably saying his name wrong too. Is it Turnus? And the Go one here as well. So I think Go's definition is probably the most important one of all.
Yeah.
I sneak into these meetings late.
Yeah, and Phil, I've got to mention here that this applies to System Z mainframes as well, but they haven't. That team hasn't implemented support for those in Go that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe you have some old colleagues you could poke about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I got to figure out who's still around. I mean, a lot of the initial open source work for S390X came out of the Germany teams, the teams in Germany.
It still is, Phil.
Okay. Oh, that's right. We got a good old IBMer here.
Mike
I
sneaks in
came
when you're not
I
paying
came in
attention.
late. Yeah, I can take that action item.
Cool.
So is there stuff we want to check before we merge this, or does this look good enough to go? We've got the two approvers on there, so I could hit the merge button, but I just wanted to, because this is such a fundamental part of the spec, just wanted to give it an extra check with the team.
Yeah, I'm just getting in here late. So you're saying we're missing for the moment S390X and Z? We need to add that to Go to make that work.
Well, yeah. So this is actually a real world problem I ran into when Ubuntu bumped their baseline for S390X, and the machine that IBM had given me didn't actually meet Ubuntu's new baseline. So I had to get a new machine provisioned, which made me realize that this needs to be specified in the spec too, but also Go itself doesn't have a way to switch the microarchitecture level for S390. I don't know if that's even relevant. I don't know if there are newer instructions, like I'm not up to date on my S390 assembly, but maybe.
Yeah,
would be something
maybe.
worth having an S390 team member look at, I think.
Okay. Is there already an issue open on this, or you can just tag me to wherever?
Yeah, we're pointing over to image spec 1172.
1172. All right.
Yeah, this is just on the general adding more platforms. This isn't specific to the S390.
Right.
And to be fully clear and transparent here, me and Phil used to discuss S390X a lot back when he was at IBM. So I was mostly joking about S390X in this table because I like Phil,
Okay.
and I love to rib Phil about S390X because frankly it's a cool platform and also totally inaccessible to 99% of developers.
I'm imagining the one that everybody's going to pay attention to is going to be having multiple variants of AMD 64. Once people start pushing AMD 64 V2, V3, that's going to wake up some people real quick.
Yeah, wasn't there a distribution that decided to bump their AMD 64 baseline? I think it was Arch. Or they were
Oh.
considering it. There's a couple distributions that have considered it recently. I can't remember if any of them settled on actually bumping their baseline to a higher variant.
I was going to guess maybe Ubuntu, but I can't remember. But even without them bumping on their side, we're looking at if builders don't order the stuff, so the V1 is always first in the image spec, potentially the platform variant checking code might not default to that and might not realize that V2 requires stuff that doesn't know about. I think even my own laptop is V1. This thing's old. All right, I don't hear people saying one way or another. Mike, do you want to take some time to look at this before I hit merge?
We can open another one.
Okay. With that then, merge it is. Y'all are being too quiet. If you wanted to stop me, you should have said something sooner. All right, I got another hopefully somewhat easy one here. But I don't know. We lost Sajay, so got my approval on it. Maybe Tianon get you on this one. This is just someone that said, hey, I got an implementation. Can I add to the list? And this has been sitting out there for a very long time. So thought I would bring it up, make sure people are aware, get some eyeballs on it. They're just saying, hey, we do OCI stuff. Can we be added to your implementation list?
I think my concern on this one is that when I looked at it, it looked like it was effectively a weekend hack project. And I don't know that we want to be the central clearinghouse for every weekend hack project that does anything with OCI images.
Let me go pull it up again.
But it does have a lot of commits. It does not have a lot of stars or watchers. So like it's a neat project. I don't want to disparage the project at all. Like it's neat and it does a thing.
Still getting progress after all these months here.
No, I guess we've got several other weekend hack projects in that list, some of which may or may not actually have active maintenance.
I have to double check and make sure you're not calling me out with that one.
Oh, I'm calling everybody out with that one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of things in here. I
Docker
actually haven't
Docker,
even
my
touched that
favorite
one.
weekend hack project.
That one took off somehow, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a handful of things in this list here.
Nothing
Oh,
big
my
and
God.
professional like GNU.
All right, I will let you think about that one. And let's see. Since we have Mike showing up here and a little bit of time, should we talk about tag pagination? Would that be a good transition?
Sure, why not?
You sound so thrilled.
I think it was just, why the arbitrary numbers, right?
That was what I was going to ask is that really the thing that's causing so much of a stumbling block? And does that have a value to people other than folks like myself? Because I thought it felt like it would be handy for clients to have an idea that if I ping this with an arbitrary number, I have a relatively good idea that the registry is going to support it. Same as if I push a manifest that's smaller than 4 megabytes, I have a relatively good idea that the registry is going to accept it. Or if that's causing so much of a stumbling block, pull it out and then that can always be revisited in a future point. That was half of my question. And the other half is, should we prefer one of these over the other for a client? Right now, it just says clients may use the link header if it's there. Should we tell clients that they should prefer the link header if they see it? That's not going to do anything for old clients don't recognize it, but new clients going forward, that would give registries hopefully a little bit of a driver to have future clients go in that direction.
I know it seems with, now with artifacts, the number could be larger, and it makes sense to provide examples or make some description here of why you would want to do one way or the other. But uppercase should probably isn't, a need here, right? You might pick a different number in another couple of years, I guess is the question.
Yeah, for the arbitrary number, if it's causing issues, we can drop it. It does mean that clients have less confidence and they don't know what registries are going to reject on them and they'll have to fall back on.
Well, they still need to
And-
support legacy 1.0 registries as well, even if they're trying to use the 1.1, right?
Yeah, there is going to be at least a registry out there that's capping us at 50.
Right. So more description is better here than, I guess. You can tell them, at least one has 1,000. A couple others may switch to that. Some older ones were 50, that sort of thing, right? I think just providing the examples is the best we can do here.
Should I just make an implementer's note? Many registries support at least 1,000. You may see a few at 50 and don't even put any should, shall, any of those terms in here, just implementer.
Yeah, or just lowercase should would be fine. Anything that's not a, we're going this way as a design kind of thing was what I was trying to avoid. I think in general, I try to make these spec APIs less strict. And I know you're pushing for more strict so you can have a thinner client, I guess. Is that accurate?
I look for more consistency between the registries when possible.
I see. Okay.
It's nice to know when I talk to 3 different registries that I don't have to write 3 different clients.
No, you still need to, yeah. Because there could have been different versions and they may change their mind, right? So you're probably still going to need to support the change.
There's always
the-
something
in
I
the
got to
number,
support for
right.
somebody.
Yeah.
There,
And those
There
registries
was-
are configurable. Somebody might be, when you say one of those registries, are you talking about, one that's running in somebody's private server, or a public version, right?
especially with the public registries, it's nice.
Oh, yeah.
There was one other kind of comment we had going back and forth, Mike, about, hey, what happens with the client that just wants to get as many as they can? And my thought process is that we specify in here that, hey, if a registry can't return everything, that it must do this fallback, or it must reject it and give the tag limit exceeded and whatnot.
Right.
And that may be the primary path most clients want to take without putting any limit on there at all. And just me as a client, just requesting it and hoping the registry is going to come back and just give me every tag that's there. And only in those cases when the registry says, nope, I'm going to reject it, then you start going this round trip of what was the most I could get out of it. It's going to tell me, let me request exactly that many. So your happy path is that most of your requests are going to go through in a single request, and you're not going to accidentally prematurely paginate.
Yeah.
Is
I
there
mean,
more I
that's a
need?
valid pattern the way I'm reading it, right?
Yeah. Is there more that needs to be said in here to say that that is a pattern that we're recommending at all? Or suggesting it anyway?
To suggest that would require you just have a couple of use cases in here, right? If you want to add the description of the use cases for, pattern A versus B, right? Then I think both are, that's fine.
Or would that maybe go in as like an extra implementer's note of implementer's note? Some registries allow this many, some registries allow this many. And
I guess
most
the reason
clients
why
may
I'm being
just-
weak on this, Brandon, is I get way too much memory of the old HTTP and UDP config settings for page sizes. And we went back and forth with the architecture and the design so many times, in Windows and Linux, that it just makes me want to, not recommend much here and leave this kind of thing to the, to the IP stack people, if at all possible. As far as optimization of how much content is streamed over in a packet, for example, because that's where you'll want to limit, and if you're limiting to a certain packet size, right, or if you're getting a lot of errors in the connection, then you're going to want to go for small pages. It really depends here, right, on what's the optimal pattern.
It does. I wonder if you're starting to talk about the next thing I was wondering about, which was when we were talking about the 413 response saying content is too large and given a header in there saying, hey, the tag limit is exceeded. Here's the limit that this registry accepts. You were pushing for a much more flexible definition where it's like per request that you might have a limit.
Yeah, I just didn't see a reason for the spec to, make that decision.
So for me, I can imagine that if I'm writing a client that is going to run multiple tag listings, that as soon as I see a limit from one, I might use that same limit for all of my tag listings across the registry. I might remember that.
Would you, if you're, run once and then exit, then you're going to have to serialize that to disk somehow in a config.
If I exit the process, then yeah, it's going to restart from the beginning and it won't remember it. But if I have some kind of long running process, when I think of my mirroring synchronization code that goes through and mirrors a whole bunch of repos, that's going to be a long-lived process that can remember this between each request. It can keep track of that per registry it talks to.
Right.
And so I would be very tempted when I'm writing that kind of code that as soon as I see a limit from one repository, that I would reuse that same limit everywhere I talk to that same registry.
That
It would-
for that same registry, right?
It
So
would
again,
eliminate a
for
handful
for
of
me,
potential
that
round
means
trips.
in your host config for that particular registry, you might want to have an optimization to specify the page size or index searches and other kinds of page-oriented, requests, GET requests.
It has the potential to eliminate future round trips. If I'm querying the tag listing every 10 minutes to see if a new tag's been pushed, that just eliminates me going back and forth with an extra round trip that says, "Oh, wait, your limit with this." I already knew the limit I
Yeah,
was talking
there
about
could
5
be
minutes
also
ago.
be a large registry cost depending on how they determine the limit exceeded, right? Whether it's by bytes or by some certain, arbitrary number of entries.
And
And you've got
that's
a
where
limit
I
on the
was.
size of each tag, but still, you could have very large ones and small ones.
That's where I was wondering, you're getting very flexible in there, and I'm wondering if that's something we really need to have in the spec, that much flexibility, or is there more value to having a fixed number for all repositories in the registry, and that way clients get a little more confidence there.
Yeah, I guess if the argument was should at least be 50, right? Or possibly less than 1,000, and within some
So-
range. Explain,
So in this, I'm not looking to have the spec tell the registry how many to do. But what I'm looking for is if
in
the
the header,
registry,
understand, yeah.
if the registry gives me this limit, I want to know that I can reuse that limit everywhere I'm talking to that registry.
Yeah, but I think it's repo based as well. It could be. Did I mention that?
You did, and that's what I'm digging into a little bit. Is
Okay.
that really needed?
I don't know. Is Tina? Yeah. Tina, what do you think? Is this something you would want to configure on a per repo basis, or is it only a registry basis on a particular connection? You're on mute. There you go.
From a client doing tag pagination?
Yeah, well, if the registry were to provide this tag limit header here, we're providing the maximum tags, would that be on a per repo basis or per registry basis?
I
If you were
don't
to do
see
this.
how per repo makes any sense because the limitations for whether or not it's expensive to return a lot, for example, would be a registry limitation, not a repository limitation.
Okay. So not a private versus public.
Yeah, it's because this isn't like a cosmetic thing. This is the query expensive thing. If it's expensive to list tags, then a registry might not want to return a large list, or it might want to return a large list regardless, because then it front loads all of the expense.
On a single connection, then is the only place you would want to do such limits. You wouldn't want to do it on a for a registry type, like root for the public images versus some private
Yeah,
repo.
that would be extremely surprising behavior for me.
Okay. Well, I wasn't sure. So I put it up there as a, maybe we should just let the registry decide. Are you wanting it to be, would you say it's a must requirement? That if they provide this value, that it's for the entire registry, not just a particular connection for a repo? Or is it just a should requirement?
Probably a should. I don't know. That's complicated.
I mean,
Yeah,
they're
it
not-
is. That's why I was trying to avoid any kind of language here.
Yeah, I mean, the language right now says the registry must return the 413 with limit exceeded.
Yeah,
And
I think
then-
that's the main point of contention on this PR. It's not the specific number, like we can argue about numbers all day. I think the point of contention is returning an error for a tag listing request that was larger than a registry wants to answer, when a registry could reasonably answer with a smaller set of items
Yeah, essentially here, and there were two questions, right? One on the, if they requested so many, what would this should be? And then here we've got a must, sorry, we've got a must with two must statements. One, that you provide the error, and two, that you provide the limit. There really is two musts here. And it says per request supported by the registry. So you can't change your mind in the registry, is basically what this says. I'd at least like to split this up for the must just to be the error and the limit to be a should. What do you think?
Ask him what I think or what Tianon thinks.
Tina, yeah. What?
I mean,
Yeah, read this sentence a couple of times. It's a long one with two must requirements.
yeah, I think returning an error at all for a tag listing that the only problem with the request is that the user asked for more tags than the registry is willing to give it feels weird.
So
That makes it harder to write a client that can request a reasonable number of tags and requires more requests to the registry, more round trips just to figure out what the registry expects the limit to be.
the problem we've got that I think we've gone back and forth on a few times is that anybody that implemented the original way without the link header was looking
Well,
at that integer, and that was a must.
That's not the original way.
Now,
That's
this
the OCI spec V1 way. The original way did have a link header.
yeah. So as per the merged 1.0 spec that, or the tagged 1.0 spec that a lot of people, myself included, and I think people on the internet have looked at and said, hey, this is easy to code against. I can do that. It says the response must include that number of responses, whatever that integer is.
Yeah, and I would consider that a bug in the spec, that that's a must.
Well, the whole reason for that is because if they don't know exactly how many responses they're going to get back, they don't know when they hit the end of the list. This
Yes,
was the
but that's
key
why it
for knowing
has
the
to
end of
have
the list.
pagination.
This was the pagination, though. There was no link header. It was
But
just looking
but
at the
there
count of
was a
numbers of
link header, and
responses.
we Chesterton fenced it out of the spec.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But I think the reason they went through with the language there, and the reason people are implementing the way they have, is that this was the way we tagged it in 1.0. The only way anybody knows that they've hit the end of the list is when the number of responses is less than whatever they requested. And if they requested everything, they assume they get everything. If they request 1,000 responses and they get 50 back, they assume that means they hit the end of the list. Because that's how the spec was written for people to write the code against.
Okay, then this is sort of a situation where we need the registries to have, or the registries need some text in here that's looser, but the registry must support at least one of the following patterns, and then the clients need to be flexible with respect to which registry they're connecting to. If we're going for a, support the most registries as possible kind of scenario.
The error we keep seeing, people keep opening this request in different repos, almost all of them against Quay, is that, hey, I followed the spec and you only gave me back 50 responses. And I found this out 6 months later when I realized I wasn't getting all the tags.
Oops.
And, the client was following the spec exactly as they were supposed to. They saw 50 responses back. They thought they had the full list.
Right.
They don't know that they're broken. And that error pops up over and over and over again on Quay. And I'm not really singling Quay out because they're doing it wrong compared to others. I think a lot of people are doing this kind of stuff. It's singling Quay out just because their limit is so low, people hit on their registry before anybody else. And so for that scenario, what I'm looking at is how can we set this up in a way that clients stopped opening issues up with Quay saying, I thought this was working for 6 months. My processes were sitting out there. And only now did I realize that we are broken. You know, can we give them feedback earlier? It says, hey, your client needs upgrading.
I guess the answer is both, right? We need more requirements on the client, and the registry needs to have some, more options and patterns that it supports.
Yeah, the direction I went with this was saying, give them an error. If you can't do it, don't give them a false sense of hope, because they're just going to come back 6 months later saying, I didn't even realize I was missing all these tags for all this time.
Yeah, I actually liked the new area you put it in that case with the additional lane. Sorry, the additional limit.
Yeah. But I know that bugs you, Tinon. I would love if we were writing this from scratch in the very beginning. I would be on your side in a heartbeat. All right, I just ran the clock out. Didn't even realize it. Somehow, despite all the stuff I threw on the agenda, we got through like 4 of them here. Anything left for the last few minutes before we all drop? If you can, show up in Seattle, Container Plumbing Days. Looks like it's gonna be fun. I'm gonna try to jump on remote. All right, y'all are being quiet again this week, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off. Mike, thanks for joining in and chiming in. Tinon, I
We'll
hope I didn't
continue
say
the
too much
chat in the issue.
as we always do. All right, thanks all. Have a great rest of your week.
All right, bye-bye now.